Amara's world was one of contrasts. By day, she moved quietly through the crowded halls of her public high school in the heart of a struggling urban neighborhood, blending into the background with practiced ease. Her classmates didn't notice much about her beyond the fact that she was serious and studious. Few knew the depth of her mind, the fire that burned behind her calm, observant eyes. Her teachers saw potential, but even they underestimated how fiercely ambitious she was. At home, the rhythm was different but no less challenging. Amara lived with her mother, Ama, a nurse who had immigrated from Ghana years earlier. Ama's life was a whirlwind of long shifts and exhaustion, a constant balancing act between providing for her family and holding them together. The apartment they shared was modest, filled with the warmth of love but also the pressures of financial strain. Amara understood every sacrifice her mother made, it fueled her resolve. When the school day ended and the evening settled in, Amara's true self emerged. With headphones on and a laptop open, she delved into the world of languages. She had taught herself 9 different tongues from the fluid tones of French and Spanish to the complex scripts of Arabic and Mandarin. YouTube videos, language apps, podcasts, she consumed them all with relentless curiosity. Each language was a key to a different culture, a bridge to understanding people across the world. Her bedroom walls were decorated with maps, flashcards, and notes scribbled in various alphabets. She dreamed not just of mastering these languages, but of what they could unlock, a future where she could work at the United Nations or serve as a cultural ambassador, advocating for unity and respect among diverse peoples. Her dream felt distant and fragile in the face of daily reality. At school, the weight of stereotypes and low expectations often pressed down on her. Teachers praised her for hard work but rarely believed she could break through the barriers around her. Some classmates dismissed her as an overachiever or too serious. But Amara did not let their opinions deter her. She kept her eyes on the horizon. The opportunity came like a sudden burst of light. Through a scholarship program aimed at supporting young talents from underrepresented communities, Amara was invited to attend an elite youth entrepreneurship summit. The event promised exposure to industry leaders, CEOs, and investors, people who shaped the future of business and innovation. It was a chance to step outside her world, to be seen and heard on a larger stage. On the morning of the summit, Amara dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that balanced professionalism with her own style. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and nerves as she entered the sleek conference center filled with bright-eyed students and powerful adults. The buzz of conversation, the gleam of polished shoes, and the hum of cameras created a world far removed from the streets she knew. Throughout the day, she listened to speeches about innovation, leadership, and the challenges of starting a business. Students from prestigious schools pitched ideas with confidence, backed by resources and experience Amara had never had. Still, she took it all in as fuel for her own dreams. The highlight was a panel discussion featuring a well-known tech millionaire, a man famous for his success and outspoken opinions. When the floor opened for questions, hands shot up eagerly. Amara sat still, waiting for the right moment. When her turn came, she stood with quiet confidence and addressed the panel. "I speak 9 languages," she said clearly, her voice steady. "I believe that understanding cultures and languages is essential for building bridges in today's global world. My dream is to work for the United Nations or as a cultural ambassador, using my skills to promote peace and cooperation." For a brief moment, the room went silent. Then, from the front, the tech millionaire laughed, a sharp, condescending sound that cut through the quiet. "Sure you do," he sneered, his tone dripping with disbelief and mockery. The audience tensed, some chuckling nervously at the audacity of his dismissal. Amara felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and hurt. But beneath that, a stronger feeling stirred, one of resolve. She held her head high, refusing to let his laughter define her. The millionaire's comment was not just a personal attack, it was a reminder of the skepticism and prejudice that often greeted young people like her, black, ambitious, and from humble beginnings. Yet, in that moment, Amara realized that her voice mattered, and that her dreams were valid even if others refused to see them. As the session moved on, Amara sat down, her mind racing. She knew the path ahead would be full of challenges and doubts cast by others. But she also knew she had something stronger than ridicule: passion, intelligence, and the unwavering support of her mother's sacrifices. Walking out of the conference center later that day, the city skyline stretched before her, a vast, complicated world waiting to be understood, bridged, and changed. Amara felt the weight of her dreams settle more firmly within her. She had spoken her truth in a room full of skeptics, and that alone was a victory. The laughter she faced was not the end of her story, it was the fuel to write the next chapter. The moment Amara's clip spread across social media, her life shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. What had been a fleeting, painful incident became a relentless storm of ridicule and judgment. Memes proliferated, each one twisting her stumble into a caricature meant to provoke laughter and scorn. Side-by-side edits compared her awkward moment with clips of flawless performances from others, emphasizing her perceived failure. Jokes and cruel commentary flooded timelines, painting her as a figure of mockery. At school, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Amara felt eyes on her everywhere she went, some curious, some pitying, and others openly amused. The whispers followed her through the hallways, ambitious, some said quietly, hinting at a kind of overreach beyond her place. Others were harsher, muttering delusional under their breath, dismissing her efforts as foolish and doomed from the start. Even teachers, those she had once looked to for support and guidance, seemed caught off guard. Some struggled to find the right words, offering awkward reassurances that rang hollow to Amara's ears. Others avoided the topic altogether, their silence speaking volumes. The school, meant to be a safe space for learning and growth, felt suddenly alien, a place where her mistakes had been magnified rather than forgiven. The constant barrage wore on her. She began to question herself more deeply than ever before. Was she really overestimating her abilities? Had she misjudged her place among her peers? The thought of facing the world online, where the comments never ceased and the judgments were unforgiving, filled her with dread. She considered deleting all her social media accounts, erasing the digital footprint that now felt like a public record of her failure. Isolation tempted her. The urge to disappear, to retreat from the relentless spotlight, grew stronger with each passing day. She wanted to shield herself from the harshness of public opinion, to find solace in silence. But the silence also felt like defeat, an acceptance that she couldn't rise above the moment that had come to define her in the eyes of so many. Then, just as she teetered on the edge of giving up, an unexpected message arrived in her inbox. It was from a verified account belonging to a UN interpreter who had watched the viral clip. The message was simple, yet profound: don't hide. Your voice matters. There's a Polyglot Youth Challenge coming up, a global competition that celebrates young people's language skills and cultural understanding. You should apply. The words hit her like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. The idea of entering a high-stakes competition was daunting, intimidating even. This wasn't just another application, it was a chance to redefine herself, to show the world what she was truly capable of beyond a viral moment of humiliation. Amara hesitated, the fear gnawing at her confidence. What if she failed again? What if the world's gaze shifted from mockery to pity or dismissal? The stakes felt enormous. But beneath the fear, a flicker of hope ignited. This was an opportunity not just to prove others wrong, but to prove to herself that she could rise, that she could take control of her narrative. After a long, restless night of wrestling with doubt and determination, Amara found herself scrolling to the application page for the Polyglot Youth Challenge. With a deep breath, she clicked the apply button. The act felt small, but it was a powerful declaration, a refusal to be defined by embarrassment, a step toward reclaiming her voice and her future. Submitting the application didn't erase the viral clip or the comments that still lingered in the back of her mind. But it marked a turning point. She had chosen action over retreat, courage over fear. Whatever happened next, Amara had begun the journey of transforming humiliation into strength, of using her passion for languages and culture to build a new story, one of resilience, hope, and growth. The plane touches down in Washington, D.C., and Amara's nerves tighten. Everything around her feels surreal: the grandeur of the airport, the high-end shuttle, the crisp itinerary in her hands. She clutches her single, scuffed suitcase as others roll sleek luggage behind them, monogrammed and matching. Her thrift store jacket feels out of place, just like she does. The other teens chatter effortlessly in multiple languages, their accents clean, their posture practiced. Most are from elite private schools or families entrenched in diplomacy, speaking with the ease of people who've been raised to belong anywhere in the world. Amara stays quiet during the orientation, aware of the way some eyes drift toward her, curious, then dismissive. When she introduces herself, a few chuckles follow, quickly stifled. Her accent, a blend of working-class Midwest and the languages she's picked up through community centers and YouTube, stands out. One girl even repeats something she said with exaggerated flair, then laughs with her friends. It stings more than Amara wants to admit. She knows she's not supposed to care, but in a space built around international poise and Polish, her every word feels exposed. Later that evening, the formal list of judges and sponsors is released. The name hits her like a slap. The same tech millionaire who laughed at her during that first audition is not only attending but serving as one of the event's key sponsors and judges. For a moment, the air seems to leave the room. Her earlier embarrassment resurfaces, his laughter echoing in her mind. It isn't just awkward. It's humiliating. She questions why she's even here, whether this whole thing is a mistake. She thinks of calling her aunt, telling her she wants to come home. But then, she doesn't. Training begins the next day, and Amara throws herself into preparation. Every hour not scheduled for a workshop is spent reviewing vocabulary, refining pronunciation, and silently practicing transitions between languages. Her roommate is polite but distant, clearly surprised by Amara's presence in such a prestigious space. Every detail, their dorm-like rooms, the formal dinner etiquette, the structured rehearsal environments, feels designed for someone other than her. Despite the internal struggle, Amara walks into the first round of the competition with her spine straight and her nerves taut. The room is elegant, outfitted with flags and translations booths, with cameras quietly capturing the event. The topic is international education reform, and each competitor is expected to switch between 3 assigned languages during the interview. Amara's combination French, Spanish, and Japanese is difficult, and she knows it. Still, she has trained for this. She breathes deeply, listens carefully to the moderator's first question, and begins. The words come steadily. Her cadence is calm, her transitions nearly seamless. In French, she speaks about public funding disparities. In Spanish, she discusses language preservation and indigenous communities. In Japanese, she respectfully navigates cultural expectations in classroom environments. The judges nod as she speaks. Even the tech millionaire, seated in the middle, seems visibly taken aback. When she finishes, the room is quiet for a second too long, then erupts into applause. The moment feels unreal. For the first time since arriving, Amara sees eyes filled not with pity or judgment but with genuine recognition. Her performance was undeniably strong, possibly the best of the day. She expects relief to follow, but insecurity lingers. She knows one great moment doesn't erase the divide she feels. As the competition progresses, the subtle slights return. Juliet from Switzerland quickly emerges as Amara's most direct competitor. She's polished and charming, a fluent speaker in 6 languages, with a background in international diplomacy through her parents. Juliet always seems camera-ready and well-liked by the staff. At first, her interest in Amara appears benign, even friendly. But as the competition intensifies, that changes. Amara overhears whispers that she's faking her fluency, that her background is embellished, that she must be using hidden devices or memorized scripts. The source of the rumors becomes clear when Juliet is caught making a sarcastic comment during a break, something about street French and Google Translate Japanese. When confronted indirectly, Juliet only smiles and says she must have been misheard. Amara doesn't confront her directly. Instead, she retreats inward. She begins second-guessing herself, replaying her sentences, wondering if her pronunciations were truly that off, if her tones sounded mechanical or unnatural. She even begins to speak less during group exercises, worried that her performance might confirm the rumors. The fear of not being enough, of being found out, even when there's nothing to hide, becomes heavier than the languages she's spent years learning. But she doesn't collapse under it. One evening, as she eats alone in the corner of the shared cafeteria, a boy from Brazil sits next to her. He tells her he was impressed by her interpretation, that her Spanish reminded him of his cousin's, not perfect, but real. Another contestant from Morocco compliments her Japanese phrasing, saying it was more respectful and culturally aware than many native speakers she's known. Slowly, these small affirmations build a quiet defense around her. During one evening debrief, a judge even makes a point of mentioning Amara's fluid multilingual agility and her depth of cultural understanding. The comment, though short, is enough to keep her grounded. Still, the weight of Juliet's rumor lingers. Some competitors treat Amara with polite detachment, clearly unsure of what to believe. Even though no formal accusation has been made, the suspicion is in the air. The tech millionaire judge watches her closely during the second round. Amara can feel his gaze, can almost hear his doubt. She wonders if he remembers her from that first encounter, if he's waiting for her to fail again so he can prove he was right to laugh. Instead of reacting outwardly, Amara turns inward again, quiet, focused, deliberate. Her preparation sharpens. She adjusts her notes, records herself, rewatches footage, corrects her own mistakes. She doesn't try to match Juliet's charm or polish, instead, she refines her authenticity. Her voice doesn't carry the smoothness of an embassy child, but it holds a different power, clarity, empathy, and grit. In quieter moments, she reflects on the world she's stepping into, a space built for those with access and fluency, not just in language, but in wealth, social capital, and global mobility. She realizes that code switching isn't just linguistic, it's cultural, emotional, behavioral. She's not just shifting between languages, she's navigating between identities, trying to belong in a world that was never designed with her in mind. And yet, she remains. Each day she wakes up and walks into the competition again is a declaration that she deserves to be there. That her story, accent, and second-hand clothes are part of the international dialogue too. Her presence itself becomes a quiet act of resistance. Even as the rumors circulate and Juliet's smile tightens when their names appear close on the leaderboard, Amara holds her place with quiet resolve. Her skills, hard-earned and battle-tested, begin to speak louder than the whispers around her. The applause she receives is no longer met with surprise, but with expectation. The stage was set for one of the most important moments of Amara's career, a live challenge that would test her skills and her reputation in front of a global audience. The stakes were high, and the tension was palpable. Contestants were tasked with interpreting a spontaneous, multilingual dialogue between diplomats from various countries. It was the kind of challenge that would push any professional to their limits, but for Amara, it felt especially crucial. This wasn't just about showcasing her talent, it was about silencing the critics who had started to question her authenticity. As the clock ticked down and the lights of the studio blazed overhead, Amara's heart raced. The pressure to perform was suffocating. She could feel the weight of the public's expectations, the sharp scrutiny of the judges, and the biting eyes of the audience, all of them waiting for a slip, a mistake, something to justify their doubts. She had prepared for months, but the reality of the moment made her feel as though she were standing on a cliff edge, ready to fall. The diplomats began speaking, their words flowing rapidly in a blend of French, Spanish, Mandarin, and Arabic. Amara had practiced for this moment, reviewing every possible scenario, but nothing had prepared her for the sudden surge of panic that gripped her. As the Mandarin dialogue began, the words that usually felt so natural, so familiar, now seemed distant and incomprehensible. She froze. A deep, unsettling silence settled over the room as the seconds ticked by. Her mind raced, trying to catch up with the conversation, but the pressure and the spotlight made everything feel like a blur. The phrases she had effortlessly translated in practice sessions now felt foreign, and the more she struggled, the more the silence stretched. The audience, the judges, they all waited. Finally, Amara spoke, but the words she uttered were wrong. She misinterpreted the meaning of a crucial phrase. Instead of translating it accurately, she mistakenly rendered it in a way that was completely off the mark. Her translation wasn't just inaccurate, it was completely out of context. The diplomat's serious exchange was reduced to a garbled mishmash that lost all of its nuance. The silence in the room deepened, and the weight of her mistake pressed down on her chest. The judges were quick to react. One of them, a distinguished figure with a cold, calculating gaze, jotted down a note. Another judge whispered something to her colleague, and they both nodded. The atmosphere turned icy. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears, and for a moment, she could no longer hear the applause that had preceded the challenge, the murmur of the audience, or even the hum of the cameras. All that existed was the silence that enveloped her. Then, the millionaire judge, sitting in the center with a smug expression, leaned back in his chair. His lips curled into a slight smile, one that Amara had seen before, on social media, in articles. It was the look of someone who was waiting for the inevitable crash. He was no stranger to high-profile failures, and he had made it clear from the start that he was skeptical of Amara's claims. The smirk on his face was the final nail in the coffin. "Miss, I believe there's been a misinterpretation," the millionaire said, his voice laced with condescension. "Perhaps a little more preparation would have been helpful." Amara's face flushed a deep red, but she could feel the sting of humiliation creep under her skin. She opened her mouth to explain, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. The damage was done, and no amount of justification could undo the way her failure had just been broadcast to millions of viewers. Her mistake had been noted, and the room was thick with judgment. The challenge ended, but the fallout had already begun. As Amara made her way off the stage, the whispers started. The online backlash was swift and brutal. Social media erupted in a frenzy. Tweets, comments, and memes poured in. Knew she was a fraud, read one tweet, accompanied by clips of Amara's misstep. A fraud with a fancy title, another user posted, sharing screenshots of her previous interviews where she'd boasted about her linguistic expertise. The trolls were relentless. They scoured every inch of her history for inconsistencies, any hint of exaggeration or imperfection. Some questioned her credentials, others attacked her character. "You can't fake language," one person wrote. "She's nothing but a glorified parrot." The comments piled up, an avalanche of ridicule and doubt. In that moment, Amara felt like she was being drowned by the very thing she had once been so passionate about: language. Back in the venue, Amara could barely keep herself together. Her hands trembled as she hurried to the backstage area, trying to find a moment of solace, a place to breathe. The weight of failure crushed her, the sting of embarrassment sharp and unforgiving. She needed to escape, to get away from the flashing cameras, the cold stares, and the harsh critiques. She couldn't bear the thought of facing anyone else, not after such a public disaster. She found herself outside the building, standing alone on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. The cool evening air didn't help, it only made her feel more exposed, more fragile. Her career, her identity, everything she had worked for felt like it was slipping through her fingers, leaving only the echoes of her mistakes. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her mother. Amara wiped her tears hastily before answering, her voice shaking. "Mom. I saw what happened, sweetheart." Her mother's voice was soft but firm. "But don't let them make you forget who you are." Amara's chest tightened. She wanted to believe those words, to hold onto them like a lifeline. But the weight of the backlash, the humiliation, the doubt, how could she possibly reconcile who she was with the image that the world now saw of her? "You are more than this moment," her mother continued. "Don't let anyone define you by your failures. You've worked too hard, and you've come too far." Amara closed her eyes, her mother's words piercing through the noise of the internet, the crowd, and the judgment. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. "I love you, Mom," she whispered, the rawness of her voice betraying the hurt she felt. "I love you too, my dear. Now, take a breath. And remember, you are not alone in this. Not ever." For the first time that day, Amara allowed herself to cry freely, not just in despair but in a quiet acceptance of her humanity. The road ahead would be difficult, but she knew that her mother's words would be the anchor she needed. Her journey wasn't over, and though this moment had been a painful crash, it would not be her defining one. Amara sat on the edge of the bed in her hotel room, the dim light from the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The television screen flickered in front of her, replaying the same clip of her performance over and over. Each time, she scrutinized her every word, every hesitation, every slight misstep. Her breath caught as she heard herself stumble over a phrase, a tiny mistake that seemed to echo louder each time she listened. It was a simple slip, but to her, it felt monumental. The weight of it pressed down on her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that this single moment would define her. She had always been proud of her fluency in multiple languages, but now, in the quiet of the room, it felt like a fraud. Her command of words, which once felt like an extension of herself, now seemed fragile, easily broken. The fear that she wasn't enough, wasn't perfect, started to creep in, seeping into her thoughts like poison. It wasn't just about the mistake. It was the sense that she was falling short of expectations, that she had let herself down in a place where everything mattered so much. Amara's fingers hovered over her phone, considering reaching out to someone, perhaps her family, perhaps her friends, but she hesitated. The weight of her shame was too heavy. Who would understand? Who could she turn to when she didn't even understand herself anymore? Just as she was about to give up and shut everything down, a notification popped up on her screen. It was a message from the interpreter she had met a few weeks ago, the one who had been so kind to offer guidance when Amara first felt lost. The woman had reached out sporadically, offering encouragement and advice, but their connection had always felt distant, professional. This message, though, was different. "Amara, I've been thinking about you," it started. "I know what you're feeling. I've been there. It's hard to put yourself out there and expose your vulnerabilities, especially when your work feels like it defines you." Amara's breath caught in her throat. The words resonated deeply. She had no idea how this woman could know exactly what she was going through, but somehow, she did. The message continued. "When I first started interpreting, I made so many mistakes. I lost jobs because of it. Clients didn't trust me. But here's the thing I've learned: fluency doesn't mean perfection. No one speaks perfectly. The most important thing is the willingness to show up and be present. That's where the real value is." Amara stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of those words sink in. Fluency doesn't mean perfection. She repeated it to herself. For the first time that day, something shifted inside her. It was as though the world had briefly opened up a crack, and light seeped in. It wasn't about the perfection of her speech, or the flawless execution of her skill. It was about connection. It was about the courage to speak, to share, to make mistakes, and then to try again. The thought made her feel lighter. She had spent so long focusing on the smallest imperfections, that she had forgotten what languages had always meant to her in the first place. She thought back to when she was a child, growing up in an immigrant household, learning to speak not just English, but also the languages of her heritage. Her parents spoke with accents, their words sometimes slow, sometimes halting, but there was always meaning behind them. Language was how she connected to her family, to her past, to a part of herself that she had always held close. It was her escape from a world that sometimes felt too big and too foreign. She had never thought of her fluency as a measure of perfection. She had always loved the beauty of language, the way it could transform, adapt, and shape itself to meet the needs of those who used it. Language was about storytelling, about culture, about the ability to convey experiences that words alone could not express. It was a bridge to understanding others and a way to understand herself. Amara placed her phone down, and for the first time in hours, she felt a sense of calm. The pressure of perfection that had gripped her all day began to loosen its hold. She thought about the many languages she had learned and how each one had become a part of her story, a part of her identity. She realized that she wasn't just fluent in words, she was fluent in connection. The ability to speak in different tongues wasn't about impressing others or meeting some standard. It was about finding common ground with people, sharing their stories, and being understood. It was about the beauty in the imperfect and the messy. That night, Amara decided to leave the hotel room. She needed to be outside, to clear her mind and remind herself of the reason she loved language in the first place. She walked the city streets, letting the sounds of the world wash over her. The bustle of the streets, the chatter of tourists, and the calls of street vendors filled the air, each person speaking in a different language, a different rhythm. In the cacophony of voices, Amara found solace. She passed a group of tourists, laughing and pointing at a map, speaking in a language she didn't recognize but understood perfectly, the universal language of curiosity and exploration. She smiled to herself, realizing how lucky she was to have access to so many different ways of seeing the world. As she walked further, she heard a vendor shouting in broken English to a passerby, offering their wares. His words were imperfect, but the urgency and warmth in his voice spoke volumes. It reminded her that communication was not about flawless speech, it was about intention, about reaching out, about connecting. Amara continued her walk, listening to the variety of accents and languages surrounding her. For the first time that day, she didn't feel ashamed. She didn't feel like a failure. Instead, she felt alive in the way the world around her moved, in the way people from all walks of life expressed themselves. She was reminded of the beauty of diversity, the richness of human experience, and the power of language to bring people together. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to speak without flaws. What mattered was that she had the courage to continue speaking, to continue learning, and to continue connecting. Each mistake, each misstep, was a part of the process, a step closer to understanding not just others, but herself. As Amara walked through the city that night, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world was vast, and her role in it wasn't to be flawless, it was to be present, to listen, to speak, and to understand. The night air felt fresh, full of possibility. She had rediscovered why she loved languages in the first place, not for perfection, but for connection. And that, she realized, was more than enough. Amara's decision to stop performing and start being real came after weeks of internal struggle. She had spent so much time perfecting her presentation, her speech, her every move, almost as if she were trying to become someone else, someone who could win. But as the competition neared its final stretch, a quiet realization washed over her: she was tired of pretending. The pressure to impress, to play by the rules of a game she didn't fully understand, had drained her. She needed to find a way to bring herself into the story, to speak her truth in a way that felt authentic and meaningful. She began reaching out to other contestants, looking for connections beyond the surface. It wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about the experience, the stories, and the people she could meet along the way. One such person was Elias, a deaf polyglot who had already caught Amara's attention. He was different from the others not just in his ability to speak multiple languages, but in the way he carried himself. His eyes were always observing, always listening, even in silence. Elias had a quiet strength about him, a calmness that intrigued Amara. When they first spoke, Amara was surprised by how easily they connected. Elias communicated primarily through American Sign Language, ASL, and though Amara didn't know much of it, she was immediately drawn to his presence. She asked him about his journey, how he had learned to navigate a world that often underestimated him because of his deafness. Elias shared his experiences with raw honesty, how, from a young age, he had been told that he couldn't do certain things, that his language was too different or too complex. He spoke of the frustration of being misunderstood, of constantly having to prove himself. But there was also an undeniable resilience in his words, a fire that Amara could feel even without fully understanding the language of his hands. Elias also taught Amara some basic ASL. The way he signed, fluid and expressive, revealed a new dimension of communication that was far more than just words. It was emotion, it was connection, it was culture. Each gesture was imbued with meaning, something deeper than spoken language. For Amara, it was a revelation. She realized that language wasn't just a tool for performing or winning, it was a bridge, a means of sharing not just ideas but truths. Elias's ability to communicate so powerfully without relying on sound made her question how she had always approached language. She had always used language to fit in, to impress. But what if, instead, she used it to be real? It was Elias who first suggested that they work together for the final challenge. The assignment was daunting: a presentation on the cultural power of language, something that would require each contestant to connect language with their own personal experiences. Elias proposed that they team up, combining their strengths, his knowledge of multiple languages, including ASL, and her ability to perform across a variety of languages. Together, they could offer a presentation that was not just about linguistic prowess, but about the power of communication itself. Amara agreed, and they began brainstorming. Their approach would be unconventional. Amara would lead a narrative performance, telling her personal story through all 9 of the languages she had learned. Each language would act as a chapter in the story, representing different moments of her life and the cultures that shaped her. The languages would not merely be tools for translation, they would be windows into different parts of her identity. The performance would start in her native language, the one she felt most comfortable with, but gradually shift through the other languages she had mastered over the years. Each transition would be marked by a moment of introspection, a pause where she would reflect on how each language had impacted her sense of self. The languages weren't just words to her, they were memories, emotions, and experiences. The presentation would allow her to speak in a way that was deeply personal, yet universal: a shared experience of growth, struggle, and the constant search for belonging. As Amara and Elias worked on their project, tensions began to rise behind the scenes. Juliet, one of the top contestants, had been eyeing Amara's progress with increasing suspicion. There were whispers circulating that Juliet might be trying to sabotage Amara's slides, manipulating the technical aspects of the presentation to make Amara appear disorganized or unprepared. It was a classic move, undermining her opponent's chances through subtle manipulation. The rumors spread quickly, and Amara could feel the weight of them hanging in the air. But this time, Amara didn't flinch. She had learned too much, and come too far, to be rattled by petty sabotage. Her decision to stop performing, to stop trying to be someone she wasn't, had made her stronger. She knew that no matter what Juliet or anyone else tried to do, her presentation would stand on its own merit. She wasn't just performing to impress the judges anymore, she was telling her truth, in every language she knew. When the day of the final challenge arrived, Amara stood before the crowd, her heart pounding but her mind clear. The room was filled with contestants, judges, and an expectant audience. The weight of the competition was real, but it felt different now. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about sharing something deeper. As she stepped onto the stage, she saw Elias watching from the side, ready to support her. He had become more than just a teammate, he had become a symbol of the strength that came from being unapologetically yourself. Amara began her performance in her native language, speaking softly but with intention. As she moved through the languages, she allowed the words to flow freely, drawing connections between her past, her identity, and the cultures that had shaped her. Each transition felt smoother than the last, each word more authentic. She didn't care about perfection, she cared about meaning. By the time she reached the final language, Amara's confidence had blossomed. Her story was no longer just hers, it had become a story of everyone who had ever felt misunderstood, underestimated, or out of place. The room was silent as she finished, her final words lingering in the air. She had told her story, not as a performance, but as a truth. When the presentation ended, there was a moment of stunned silence before the room erupted in applause. Amara had done it. She had shared her truth in a way that transcended language, culture, and competition. Whatever happened next, she knew she had already won. Amara sat at the small desk in her room, the walls lined with old posters of anime characters and family photos. A notebook lay open in front of her, pages filled with notes in various stages of completion. She had spent weeks, no, months dreaming of this moment. Every word, every idea, had been carefully crafted, a fusion of her life's many chapters. Now, she was ready to bring them together into one piece, a spoken word performance that would not only tell her story but also demonstrate the power of language, resilience, and identity. Her piece was ambitious, 9 languages woven together into a tapestry of sound and meaning. Each language would represent a different part of who she was, a different thread in the fabric of her life. Her Ghanaian roots, her New York upbringing, her love for K-dramas and anime, the songs her mother used to sing, these were the ingredients that would make up her story. She would not merely perform, she would speak her truth in the many tongues that had shaped her, each transition carrying its own significance and emotional weight. Amara's heritage was the foundation of her voice. She began with the rich, melodic rhythms of Chui, her mother tongue. She spoke of her family, her mother, who had taught her to value both tradition and innovation, and her father, who had always encouraged her to pursue her dreams without fear. The language flowed effortlessly, full of warmth and familiarity, as though the words themselves were carrying the memory of her childhood. Then, without missing a beat, Amara shifted to English, her second language, which she had learned growing up in the bustling streets of New York. This language, though not her first, had shaped her identity as much as Chui had. It was here that she had learned to navigate the complex, fast-paced world around her. The city had taught her to be tough, to find her voice, and to stand tall despite the odds. She spoke of the challenges she had faced as a young immigrant, the cultural clashes, and the moments of doubt, but also the resilience she had found within herself. The transitions between languages weren't just technical feats, they were emotional. Amara wanted each language to do more than just communicate words. She wanted them to communicate the essence of her identity, the way each language held different memories and feelings, each tied to a specific place, time, or experience. So, when she moved from English to Korean, it wasn't just a linguistic shift, it was a leap into her love for K-dramas, the world of romance, drama, and intense storytelling that had captured her heart during her teenage years. Korean was a language of emotion for Amara. She had watched hours of K-dramas with subtitles, absorbing the cadence and rhythm of the language, even if she didn't always understand everything. The language brought to mind the feelings of longing, hope, and resolution that her favorite dramas had instilled in her. It was a space where she felt free to express emotions that were often difficult to articulate in English or Chui. In Korean, she spoke of the escapism she had found in these stories, the way they taught her that no matter the struggles one faces, there is always a way forward. The language was like a balm to her soul, helping her heal and find comfort during the darker moments of her life. Amara's journey wouldn't be complete without mentioning her love for anime, so she continued with Japanese. Anime had been a huge part of her adolescence, offering both adventure and introspection. She remembered the late nights watching her favorite shows with her friends, the way the characters' struggles resonated with her own. In Japanese, she spoke of the lessons she had learned from these animated worlds, resilience, friendship, and the importance of never giving up, no matter how insurmountable the challenges seemed. Each language flowed smoothly into the next, the transitions becoming more seamless, more natural as she practiced them. Her coach, a former spoken word artist with a keen ear for rhythm and flow, had been instrumental in helping her refine the piece. He was also her mentor and interpreter, guiding her not only in the performance but in the emotional transitions between languages. "Think of it like a song," he had told her. "Each language has its own melody. Let it flow. Let it be you." They spent hours working together, experimenting with different ways to emphasize the shifts in tone and pace. When Amara moved from Japanese to French, for example, she had to adjust her delivery to reflect the elegance and lyrical quality of the language. French was a language that reminded her of her mother, who used to sing French lullabies when Amara was young. The language was soft and musical, and it was here that she spoke of her mother's love and the wisdom she had imparted. When she finally moved into Spanish, a language she had learned in high school, it was almost as if the piece was coming full circle. Spanish represented the vibrant, passionate part of her, the side that loved dancing, music, and the celebration of life. It was a language that allowed her to express herself freely, a language full of color and energy. In Spanish, Amara spoke of the importance of community, of the friends who had supported her through thick and thin, and of the love that bound them all together. By the time Amara reached the final language, German, she felt she had spoken every part of herself. German was the language of her most recent journey, a language she had learned during a summer study program abroad. It was a language of precision and structure, and it felt almost like a way to tie everything together. When she spoke in German, it was as though she was reaffirming her commitment to being her true self, no matter how complex or multifaceted she was. She didn't need to fit into a box. She was a tapestry of many cultures, many languages, and many experiences. As Amara finalized the piece, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This performance wasn't just about demonstrating her linguistic skills, it was about embracing every part of who she was, the many threads that made up the story of her life. It was a declaration of resilience, how, no matter where she had come from or where she was going, she would always carry her truth with her, in every language she spoke. The day of the competition arrived, and backstage, the tension was palpable. Amara was nervous, but she was ready. As she adjusted the microphone and prepared to take the stage, Juliet, one of the other competitors, approached her. There was a coolness in Juliet's demeanor, a skeptical look in her eyes. She didn't believe in Amara's concept. She thought it was too chaotic, too fragmented to make any real impact. But this time, Amara was calm. She had done the work, and she believed in what she was about to do. Without hesitation, she smiled and, in fluent German, replied, "In every language, I choose truth." The words hung in the air, the certainty of her response quiet but powerful. She turned and walked on stage, ready to speak her truth in 9 languages. When she began, the room fell silent. And as she moved through the languages, seamlessly transitioning from one to the next, even the skeptical judges couldn't help but take notice. It was not just a performance, it was a revelation. Amara's voice, her story, her truth, resonated with every person in that room. And when she finished, there was no question that she had found her voice, in every language she chose to speak. Amara stepped onto the stage with a quiet confidence, her heart pounding in her chest as the audience's expectant gazes bore into her. The room was filled to capacity, with cameras capturing every moment, live streaming her performance to millions of viewers across the globe. The spotlight illuminated her, but she felt a sense of calm, as if this was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. She had already crossed so many barriers, both internal and external, to reach this point, and now she was ready to tell her story not just with words, but through the language of her soul. The moment her lips parted, the audience fell into a hushed silence, waiting for the first sound to break through. Amara began in English, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She spoke of her childhood, of her father's silence, a silence that had lingered between them like a shadow, and of her mother's lullabies, which had been the only true language she had known in her early years. The words were familiar, yet somehow transformed in the way they were spoken, carried by the cadence of her voice and the emotion behind them. As she moved through her narrative, Amara seamlessly transitioned into French. It was as though the very air around her had shifted, and with it, the rhythm of her story. The crowd was mesmerized, watching as she effortlessly glided between languages, each transition as fluid as a wave that rolled onto the shore. The emotional weight of her words was not lost in translation. Instead, each language seemed to add a new layer to the story, one language for each facet of her life, each phase of her journey. French, with its elegance and poetic flow, brought out the tenderness of her memories, the quiet moments she had spent listening to her mother's voice, the lullabies that filled their small home. Next, she switched to Spanish. The language flowed more quickly, more passionately, and it was as if her very heart was speaking through the words. She spoke of her school days, lonely days filled with the ache of feeling like an outsider, a girl who didn't quite fit into the world around her. She spoke of the feeling of not being understood, of the yearning to be heard, and of how language had become her escape, her lifeline. In Spanish, her words danced, full of rhythm and life, as if they were reclaiming the joy that had once eluded her. Without missing a beat, Amara moved into Japanese, the syllables crisp and deliberate, each word landing with a quiet but profound significance. She spoke of the times when she felt lost in translation, both in language and in life, trying to navigate spaces where she didn't belong. But even then, language had become her compass, guiding her through the uncertainty. She followed with Korean, its melodious tones adding a sense of hope, as though she were embracing the future with open arms. Through these languages, she was painting a picture not just of her past, but of her growth, her ability to overcome the pain of isolation and to connect with the world around her. Arabic followed, rich and full of history, as she spoke of the deep connection she felt to her roots, to her heritage, and to the languages that had shaped her identity. She spoke of the beauty of words that carried with them the weight of centuries, and how she had learned to appreciate not just the language itself, but the culture and the people behind it. Mandarin came next, and Amara felt the weight of the world shift again, her words smooth and deliberate as she told of the bridges she had built with the people she had met along the way. Her Mandarin was confident, a testament to the hours of practice, the years of studying, but more than that, it was a declaration of the growth she had achieved, of the journey she had traveled. With each language, Amara's story unfolded like music, each note rising and falling, each word resonating in harmony with the one before it. The transitions were not just linguistic, they were emotional, each one unlocking a different part of her soul, revealing pieces of her past and her beliefs. Language, she realized, was not just a tool for communication. It was a bridge, one that connected her to others, to herself, and to the world. The room was captivated, and Amara could feel the energy in the air shift, as though the audience had been swept up into her story, carried along by the ebb and flow of her words. The final transition came, and it was deliberate this time. She chose Chui, her mother's native tongue. The room fell silent as Amara spoke the last line of her performance, her voice trembling with emotion. It was a simple sentence, but it held the weight of everything she had shared, a declaration of her belief in the power of language to connect, to heal, and to build bridges between people. As the last syllable left her lips, the room erupted into applause. The sound of clapping filled the air, but it was more than just a recognition of her performance. It was an acknowledgement of the depth of her story, of the journey she had taken to get here, and of the courage it took to share her voice with the world. For a moment, Amara stood there, still, her heart racing, feeling the weight of what she had just accomplished. She had told her story not just with words, but with the very languages that had shaped her identity. And in doing so, she had opened a door for others to do the same. But it was the millionaire judge who stood out the most. The man who had, earlier in the competition, been critical of her ability to stand out in a sea of talent, the one who had questioned her choices, now stood with tears in his eyes. Slowly, he clapped, first tentatively, then with more confidence, until he was clapping loudly, his hands meeting in a rhythmic celebration of Amara's performance. The crowd, too, joined in, their applause swelling in a collective outpouring of appreciation. He took the microphone, his voice shaky with emotion. "I was wrong," he said, his words carrying through the room. "I thought language was just about words. But it's so much more. It's about connection. And Amara, you've shown us all what it means to truly connect." His admission of being wrong wasn't just about acknowledging her talent, it was about understanding the power of what she had shared. Amara had demonstrated something that transcended competition, something deeper than performance, the ability to break down barriers, to speak to the heart of humanity, and to use language not as a means of self-promotion, but as a vehicle for building empathy and understanding. As the applause continued, Amara stood there, overwhelmed by the response. But she also felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that this performance, this moment, had been more than just a display of skill. It had been a declaration of who she was, of where she came from, of what she believed, and of the bridges she would continue to build, one word at a time. Amara's victory in the competition marks not just the culmination of years of hard work and self-doubt, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where her voice, once silent and hesitant, now carries the weight of hope, change, and representation. Winning the competition, along with the scholarship to study linguistics abroad, is a tangible achievement. It opens doors for her future and validates her dreams. But it is the intangible impact of her victory that truly sets her apart. Amara's story transcends personal triumph and becomes a beacon for others. Her journey from a shy, mocked girl to an accomplished polyglot resonates deeply, and soon, major news outlets pick up her story. Her success is not merely about speaking multiple languages, it is about breaking down the walls of doubt, fear, and prejudice. Amara represents something far greater than individual achievement. She becomes a symbol of possibility for young Black girls around the world, who see in her a reflection of their own untapped potential. Her story is one of resilience, of turning the weight of mockery and rejection into the fuel for self-discovery and empowerment. The response to her story is immediate and overwhelming. Letters, emails, and messages flood in from young girls who have seen Amara's story and felt, for perhaps the first time, a sense of belonging. "Now I know I can," they write. These words are more than just a reflection of Amara's impact, they signal a shift in mindset, a redefinition of what is possible for young Black girls who have long been marginalized or overlooked in spaces where linguistic and intellectual prowess are celebrated. Amara's victory tells them that they, too, can break barriers and defy expectations. This sense of empowerment is something Amara takes to heart. Her victory and newfound visibility give her the platform and responsibility to further amplify her message. She channels this momentum into creating a YouTube channel, where she shares her love of languages and cultures with the world. But Amara's approach is different from other language educators. She doesn't just teach words and grammar, she teaches with cultural context and compassion, integrating the heart and soul of each language into her lessons. She recognizes that language is more than just a set of rules, it is a reflection of a people's history, values, and way of life. Her lessons become a bridge, not only between different languages but between cultures, fostering understanding and respect in a way that is deeply human. Through her channel, Amara creates a space where learners of all backgrounds can feel seen and understood. Her teaching style is warm, engaging, and accessible, reflecting the very values she seeks to instill in others. The focus on cultural context helps her audience grasp the nuances and beauty of each language, making learning a richer, more immersive experience. Amara's compassionate approach breaks down the intimidation factor often associated with learning a new language, encouraging people to embrace mistakes as part of the process and to engage with language as a tool for connection rather than perfection. The success of her YouTube channel catches the attention of influential figures, including a millionaire who is inspired by Amara's mission and vision. The millionaire offers to fund her nonprofit organization, Voices Without Borders, which becomes a cornerstone of Amara's ongoing efforts to make language education accessible, inclusive, and culturally rich. Through this nonprofit, Amara is able to provide scholarships, workshops, and resources for young people, particularly those from underrepresented communities, to learn languages and explore different cultures. Voices Without Borders is more than an educational initiative, it is a movement to break down cultural and linguistic barriers, empowering individuals to become global citizens and active participants in a world that is increasingly interconnected. With the support of her nonprofit, Amara can further her goal of creating a world where language is seen as a tool for inclusivity, empathy, and mutual respect. She envisions a future where every child, no matter their background, has the opportunity to learn about the world's languages and cultures, and in doing so, learn about themselves and others in ways that transcend borders and divisions. The organization provides resources for children to learn languages with cultural context, allowing them to connect with the diverse world around them and challenge the often narrow and exclusionary narratives they may have been exposed to. Amara's impact is not limited to her work with young people, however. She is a role model for all those who have felt overlooked or underestimated, proving that with determination and passion, one can change the narrative about who belongs in spaces of power, knowledge, and influence. She stands as a living example of what is possible when we dare to pursue our dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. Amara's journey speaks to the power of education, not just as a means to personal success, but as a means to social change. Her success is a victory not just for herself but for the countless others who now feel empowered to speak up, to learn, and to claim their place in the world. Back home, Amara's relationship with her little brother grows in ways that mirror her own transformation. As a language teacher, she doesn't just teach him words, she teaches him the joy and importance of learning. She shares with him the richness of language and culture, starting with his first words in French. This moment, intimate and personal, symbolizes more than just the passing of knowledge, it marks the transmission of her values and aspirations to the next generation. Her little brother, who once saw her struggle, now sees her as a teacher, a role model, and an inspiration. For Amara, teaching him his first words is a powerful moment of connection, a way to pass on the legacy of resilience, learning, and growth that she has worked so hard to build. It's not just about the words themselves, but the doors they open, the doors of possibility, of understanding, of communication. Through language, Amara teaches him that the world is vast and varied, but it is also connected by the shared experiences of humanity. It's a lesson she has learned herself, and one that she now imparts to him. Amara's story, from a girl who once stood alone, mocked for her voice, to a polyglot who speaks for millions, is a testament to the power of language to transform lives. It is a story of resilience, of breaking free from the limitations others have placed on you, and of using your voice to create change in the world. Amara has not just mastered languages, she has mastered the art of storytelling, of sharing her journey and inspiring others to believe that they, too, can rewrite their narratives and pursue their dreams. She is no longer the girl on the sidelines, watching the world pass by. She is the girl who has found her voice, and through it, has created ripples of change that are felt far beyond her own life. Amara's voice is one of empowerment, hope, and possibility. And through her, countless young people are learning that the world is theirs to explore, understand, and shape, one word at a time.